The desert stretched like a sheet of rusted iron beneath the sinking sun, flat and endless, save for the brittle spine of rock ridges breaking the horizon. A single rider moved slow through it, horse bowed beneath the heat, the man above him silent, his shadow long as a coffin across the sand. He carried no hurry in his posture, no destination either, only the dust and the miles that never seemed to finish. His hat brim shadowed his face, but the cut of his jaw spoke of years chiseled hard by hunger and weather and the sort of killing men don't put into words. He was not expected to find anyone out there. No one sane lingered where even vultures struggled. Yet as dust bled into the sky and the air cooled sharp, he spotted her, a figure half buried at the base of a mesquite, arms slack, skirt torn, skin pale against the earth. For a moment he thought she was already claimed by the desert. He reined in slow, boots dragging as he dismounted, dust whispering off leather. Her eyes opened, not wide, not with surprise, but like a door unlatched. Clouded with pain, they locked on him, and in a voice cracked like glass she whispered, "Kill me quickly." The words hung there, brittle as the dry air. The cowboy froze, hand grazing the butt of his revolver. Her face carried no plea for mercy, no flinch of fear. Only the weary certainty of someone who had run to the end of her rope. Blood matted her hair. Sand crusted her lips, and yet there was defiance in the tight set of her jaw. He crouched beside her, dust shifting under his spurs. "You're still breathing," he said, voice low and gravel-thick. "Not for long." She tried to turn away, but the movement tore something inside her, and she stifled a cry. Her hands clenched at her torn skirt, clutching it close with desperate strength, as if hiding something beneath. The cowboy studied her a long moment. He had seen men beg for their lives, women scream for salvation, but rarely had he met one who demanded death before his name. He slid an arm beneath her shoulders, lifted her with the care of a man handling something fragile. She was lighter than she looked, as if most of her had already been taken. He carried her a short ways off to where a dip in the land offered shelter from the wind. His horse snorted, restless, but he ignored it, setting her down gentle as he could. He fetched a canteen, tipped water to her lips. She drank only enough to wet her tongue, then pushed it away with the last of her strength. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If they find me, they'll tear you apart too." The cowboy gave no answer. He struck a match, lit a small fire from kindling he carried, the flames licking at dry wood and painting his face in copper light. The desert night fell fast, stars hard and sharp above them. He sat across the fire, watching her as she lay curled, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the flames as if daring them to consume her. She did not sleep. Neither did he. Between them stretched the silence of strangers bound by something unspoken. The cowboy kept his revolver across his knees, his gaze shifting off into the horizon, where the wind carried whispers that might have been hoofbeats or only his imagination. At length she stirred, her voice brittle. "You'll regret stopping. Should have ridden past." "Maybe," he said. He had no reason to stay, no obligation to her, no promise made. And yet something in the raw steel of her words bound him there stronger than rope. The fire popped. Shadows crawled across her face, revealing the bruises along her cheek. The dirt ground into her skin. She had fought someone, fought hard and lost. But beneath the ruin, he glimpsed not weakness, but a strange, stubborn spark. He pulled his coat tighter, leaned back against the saddle. "You got a name?" She shook her head. "Doesn't matter." He didn't press. Names were often lies anyway, or graves best left covered. Instead, he let the silence fill again. The night grew colder, coyotes howled far off, and the desert seemed to draw tighter around their small circle of fire. Hours passed before she spoke again, softer now, as though to herself. "I carry something they'll kill to take back, something they marked me for." Her hand slipped toward her thigh, toward the torn edge of her skirt. She stopped, clutching the fabric shut again, and her eyes burned with shame or rage. He could not tell which. The cowboy didn't move. He only watched, his face unreadable, the firelight throwing lines across his weathered skin. His instincts told him this was no chance meeting. She had dragged danger with her across the desert, and by choosing not to leave her, he had already stepped into it. Still, he made no move to walk away. She saw the decision in his silence and turned her gaze back to the fire. For the first time, her lips curved in something close to a bitter smile. "Then you're as much a fool as I am." Wind rose, carrying dust across the flames, making them dance wild. Beyond the circle of light, darkness pressed close, heavy with threat. The cowboy shifted, hand brushing his revolver again. The hoofbeats were not imagination now. They were distant, faint, but real. Her eyes widened, catching the sound before he spoke it. "They're coming." He stared into the fire a long moment, then lifted his gaze to the black horizon. His face gave nothing away, but his hand closed fully around the revolver. The fire crackled, the wind hissed, and in the silence between heartbeats, the night seemed to lean forward, waiting. The hoofbeats faded before they drew close, like ghosts retreating into the night. Still, the woman lay stiff, eyes locked on the dark as though expecting shapes to break free of it at any moment. The cowboy kept his hand on the revolver until silence settled again. Even then, he didn't relax. He had learned long ago the desert had more patience than men. It could wait for him to blink before striking. When the fire dwindled to embers, she finally spoke. "They'll find the trail. It don't matter how far I've run. They always do." His gaze never left the horizon. "Who?" For a moment she said nothing. Then she pulled at the ragged hem of her skirt and peeled the fabric from her thigh. In the glow of the firelight, he saw it. A brand seared into her flesh, raw even now though it must have been burned weeks past. The mark was ugly, a circle cut through by a bar, the kind outlaws used to claim cattle or women. The cowboy's jaw tightened. He knew the brand. The Black Vultures. A gang whose shadow stretched across the borderlands like a sickness. He had crossed paths with two of them once in a saloon fight in Pecos. Mean-eyed bastards who smiled while they drew knives. He had left one bleeding on the floor, the other limping into the night. "They kept me," she said, her voice brittle, more statement than confession. "When they were done, they marked me. Said I was theirs until the desert swallowed me. Said no one would dare touch me now, without knowing whose property I was." The cowboy stayed quiet. Words, he knew, were useless against scars carved into flesh. He only studied her face, the way she lifted her chin even as her hands trembled. She would not look away from him, as though daring him to flinch. "They want what I took," she continued. "It's why they'll never stop." Her fingers dug into the earth beside her. "I don't care if they kill me, but I won't let them take it back." "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then pressed her palm flat over her chest, beneath the tatters of her blouse. "Proof," she said. "Enough to hang every last one of them if the law still had teeth in this land." The cowboy almost smiled at the irony. Out here, law was as thin as water on a skillet. Still, he could not help but feel a flicker of respect. She had not run for her life alone. She had run with fire clenched tight against her ribs. The night grew colder, and she shivered though she did not complain. He threw his coat across her shoulders. She blinked at him in surprise, as though kindness were rarer than rain. He leaned back against his saddle again, speaking low. "That's why you asked me to kill you quick. Not just for the pain. You wanted to make sure they never took you alive." She gave a single nod, sharp, final. They sat in silence until the horizon began to pale. The fire had burned to ash when first gold edge of the sun lit the desert. She stirred, rising stiffly to her knees. Her legs buckled, but she caught herself with a hand to the earth. He rose too, slow and deliberate, and offered his arm. She hesitated before taking it, pride wrestling with need, but in the end her fingers wrapped around his sleeve. They broke camp without words. His horse carried them both, though the beast groaned under the weight. She leaned against him, head bowed but eyes still restless, watching the land. The cowboy rode with one hand near his revolver, scanning ridges and arroyos for signs of movement. By noon they reached a dry wash cutting through the earth. The cowboy dismounted, leading the horse along the shaded cut, careful not to leave easy tracks in the open desert. The woman followed slow, her breath ragged but steady. When they stopped to rest, she crouched with her back against a rock wall, fingers curling into her skirt. "You could still ride away," she said. "No shame in leaving me here. Wouldn't be the first man to do so." He looked down at her, eyes narrowed under the brim of his hat. You think I stayed this long by mistake?" She held his gaze, and something shifted in her expression. Not trust. Not yet, but crack in the wall she'd built around herself. "Then you're already in their sights," she murmured. "Wouldn't be the first time," he said. The afternoon stretched on, the heat pressing against them like a heavy hand. They shared water in silence, the canteen passing back and forth, their eyes never straying far from the ridges above. Once, the cowboy caught the faint glint of sunlight on steel high up on the rocks. A watcher, he said nothing, only tightened his grip on the revolver and moved them along quicker. By dusk, they found shelter in the ribs of an old canyon, where black rock rose like jagged teeth. The cowboy built another small fire, low and smokeless, while she curled close to the flames, too weary to speak. He studied her in the flickering light. She was no helpless victim. Bruised, yes. Broken, no. There was iron in her yet, hammered hard by suffering but not shattered. She noticed his stare and gave a faint, bitter smile. "What do you see when you look at me?" she asked. He answered plain. A survivor. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Pain, hope, disbelief all tangled. She looked away quick, hiding the sheen of tears. Night deepened. Coyotes yipped from afar, the sound carrying on the wind. The cowboy sat with his revolver in his lap, the fire painting him in shadows, while she drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. In her dreams, she whispered names he did not know, curses spat at men who weren't there. Once she woke with a start, clutching his arm like a drowning soul seizes rope, before realizing where she was and pulling back, ashamed. "You'll regret this," she muttered, curling in on herself again. The cowboy did not answer. He kept his eyes on the darkness, ears tuned for the sound of hooves. When the first crack of gunfire shattered the silence, it came not as a surprise, but as an inevitability. Bullets sparked against the canyon wall, rock chips stinging the firelight. The woman's eyes flew wide, and she scrambled closer to him. He was already moving, revolver drawn, scanning the shadows above. A voice echoed from the ridge, cruel and mocking. "We'll have her back. Stranger, walk away now, and maybe we'll let you keep breathing." The cowboy did not reply. He only shifted his stance, shielding her with his body, firelight glinting off the steel in his hand. His silence was answer enough. The canyon held its breath. The outlaws were patient, knowing they had him pinned. The woman's fingers dug into his sleeve again, trembling. He glanced down at her, and for a heartbeat their eyes locked. Hers filled with terror, his calm as stone. When the next shot rang out, he fired back. The desert swallowed the sound, and the night lit with fire. Gunfire clawed at the canyon walls, sparks tearing from the stone as bullets skipped across the firelight. The cowboy shoved the woman down into the dirt, his body covering hers, the heat of lead hissing past. He rose into a crouch, revolver steady, and snapped a shot toward the ridge. A cry rang out, followed by the scrape of boots scrambling in the dark. The attackers withdrew into silence, their shadows swallowed by rock. But he knew better than to think they were gone. The canyon was a trap, and they were caught inside it. The woman clutched at his sleeve. "They won't stop," she whispered. "I know." His voice carried no tremor, only certainty. He checked the cylinder, counted his rounds. Too few, always too few. She tried to rise, but her leg buckled under the weight of the brand scar. He caught her before she fell, steadying her against him. Her breath came fast, her eyes wide with fear she masked with defiance. "Then finish it now," she said, almost spitting the words. "Spare yourself their knives." He shook his head, jaw set. "Not yet." They moved quick, fire abandoned, shadows their only cover. He led her down the canyon spine, keeping close to the walls, every step measured to leave as little sound as possible. Above, stones shifted, the outlaws tracking them, patient as wolves. The moon slid from behind clouds, silvering the canyon with cruel light. He saw movement on the ridge, silhouettes of men, rifles glinting. He fired once, forcing them to scatter, then push her ahead, his hand firm on her back. "Keep low," he ordered. They pressed on, the canyon narrowing until it spat them out into open desert. Wind knifed cold against them, carrying the faint taint of gunpowder and sweat. The horse, left tethered, stamped and snorted. The cowboy swung her up into the saddle, climbed behind, and dug his spurs. The animal lunged forward, hooves pounding a desperate rhythm across the flats. Shouts rang out behind them, answered by gunfire. Bullets whined past, one slashing to the brim of his hat, another grazing the horse's flank. The beast screamed but kept running, foam flecking its mouth, muscles straining with every stride. The woman clung to him, her face pressed into his chest, the smell of blood and dust sharp between them. She did not beg. She did not cry, only held tight, as if her grip alone could drag him from the reach of death. They rode hard until the night blurred into exhaustion. When the desert finally swallowed the sound of pursuit, the cowboy slowed the horse, letting it stumble to a halt near a cluster of jagged boulders. He slid down, pulling her after him, both collapsing into the shadow of stone. For a long moment neither spoke, their lungs heaving, the silence broken only by the horse's labored breaths. At last she lifted her head. Her face was pale in the moonlight, her eyes searching his, as though trying to decipher what kind of man he truly was. "You could have left me," she said, voice raw. "Could have," he admitted. "And you didn't." He said nothing more. Words would only muddy what had already been decided. She leaned back against the rock, exhaustion dragging at her. "They'll keep after us. You know that." "I do." Her hand rose to her chest, fingers pressing against the hidden proof she carried. "Then why stay?" His eyes were hard in the moonlight, something zain about choice. She studied him, lips parting as if to argue, but no words came. Whatever she saw in him silenced her more than any gun could. The night grew colder. He built no fire this time, where is smoke of light. Instead, they huddled in the dark, the woman curled close to keep warm. Sleep eluded them both, but in the stillness their breaths found a rhythm, steady as the desert wind. At dawn they rode again. The land opened before them, flat plains rolling toward distant mesas, the air sharp with morning chill. She swayed in the saddle, her body weakened, but her eyes burned with something fierce. As the sun climbed, they came upon the bones of a ruined mining shack. Its timbers leaned like old men, roof caved, walls blackened from fire long ago. The cowboy led her inside, set her down on a broken cot. Dust rose in golden shafts of light through the holes in the roof. He searched the place quick, finding little more than rusted tools and rat droppings. But it offered shelter, and for now that was enough. The woman sat stiff, hands twisting in her lap. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You think we can outrun them?" He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "No, but we can make a stand." Her breath caught, fear warring with something deeper, something like resolve. She turned her gaze to the ruined wall, speaking more to herself than him. "I swore I'd never let them take me alive again." "You won't," he said, final as a gravestone. The words hung heavy, but instead of despair, she drew strength from them. She straightened, shoulders set, and for the first time since he found her, she looked less like prey and more like a fighter. Through a crack in the shack's wall, the cowboy saw movement, a faint smear of dust rising on the horizon. Riders. 6, maybe more. They had followed. They always would. He checked his revolver, the sound of the cylinder clicking loud in the silence. She watched him, then reached for the rifle leaning broken against the wall. Her hand shook, but she gripped it with a steadiness born of desperation. "You'll die if you stay with me," she said. "Maybe," he answered. "Then why?" His gaze met hers. "Because I already chose." The moment lingered, fire smoldering in the silence between them. Outside, the dust cloud grew larger, closer. The sound of hoofbeats returned, not faint this time, but rolling thunder drawing nearer. The cowboy rose to his feet, revolver in hand, shoulders squared against the coming storm. The woman stood beside him, weak but unflinching, rifle clutched tight, though it was nearly more burden than weapon. The shack creaked in the wind, shadows deepening as the sun slid lower, gilding the desert in dying gold. They were two souls against the weight of the horizon, against the tide of violence rushing toward them. The first outlaw's whistle cut through the air, sharp and cruel. The others answered with laughter, the sound echoing off the rocks. The cowboy's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, planting his boots firm in the dust. "They'll come through that door," he said quietly. "And then?" she asked. He drew the hammer back on his revolver. The sound was like the toll of a bell. "Then we make 'em regret it." The shack breathed with silence, every groan of timber a warning. Dust drifted through the gaps in the boards as the riders drew close, their laughter rolling across the plain like thunder. The cowboy stood steady in the ruin's doorway, revolver ready, boots rooted in dirt that would soon drink blood. Behind him, the woman braced the old rifle against her shoulder, its stock cracked but serviceable enough for one more fight. Hoofbeats thundered into the yard, kicking up a storm of grit. Shadows filled the doorway, the first outlaw swaggering forward with a grin carved across his face. "There she is," he called, voice rough, eyes gleaming. "Told you she wouldn't get far. And look at the fool who thinks he can keep her." The cowboy said nothing. His silence was heavier than any threat. The outlaw laughed and drew. The cowboy's revolver cracked first. One shot, clean and final, sent the man sprawling backward into the dust. The laughter outside died to stillness. Then chaos broke. Gunfire shredded the shack walls, splinters flying like hornets. The cowboy pulled the woman down behind a broken cot, bullets tearing the air above. She bit her lip until it bled, forcing her hand steady as she raised a rifle through a gap in the boards. She fired once, the recoil slamming her shoulder. A scream followed. One outlaw tumbled from his saddle. The cowboy fired back with calm precision, each shot chosen, not wasted. He moved like a man who had fought too many battles to care about the odds. A bullet grazed his arm, burning hot, but he didn't falter. Another outlaw fell, then another. Still they kept coming. Shadows darted between the beams of light, boots pounding, rifles flashing. The shack shook with a storm of violence. The woman reloaded clumsily, fingers trembling, but her eyes never left the fight. She was no longer begging for death. She was clawing for life. An outlaw crashed through the doorway, blade in hand, teeth bared. The cowboy met him head-on, revolver empty now, steel replaced by fists. They grappled in the dirt, the outlaw's knife slashing close. The cowboy slammed him against the wall, wrenched the blade free, and drove it home. The man collapsed, choking on blood. The woman screamed, not from fear but warning. Another outlaw burst through the back wall, splintering rotten wood. He lunged at her, hands clawing. She raised the rifle like a club and swung, the crack of wood against bone ringing sharp. The man staggered, stunned. She pulled the trigger point blank. Smoke filled the shack, and the outlaw crumpled at her feet. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then boots thudded outside. A shadow larger than the rest stepped into view. The gang's leader. His face was a map of scars, his grin carved cruel beneath eyes like black stone. He carried a long-barreled revolver, polished, deliberate, a weapon of ritual rather than war. "Stranger," he drawled, voice carrying like gravel in the wind. "You've made yourself busy. But ghosts don't linger. They fade." His gaze shifted to the woman. "And you thought you could run? Thought you could take from me?" Her hands tightened on the rifle, but the cowboy moved first, stepping into the doorway, revolver reloaded, eyes locked on the scarred man. The leader chuckled low. "You think you're her savior, but you're just another grave." The two men stood still, the air between them heavy with the promise of death. Time stretched thin, the desert holding its breath. The woman watched, her body trembling but her eyes bright, alive. The leader moved fast, but the cowboy moved faster. His revolver roared, the shot splitting the stillness. The scarred man staggered, clutching his chest, disbelief painted across his face. He fired once in return, the bullet slamming into the cowboy's side. The cowboy swayed but did not fall. He fired again, final, and the leader collapsed in the dust. Silence. The remaining outlaws broke, fear scattering them like birds into the desert night. Their hoofbeats faded, leaving only the whisper of wind through the ruined shack. The cowboy stood, shoulders heaving, revolver slipping from his hand. Blood seeped through his shirt, dark and heavy. The woman caught him as he stumbled, her strength barely enough to hold him upright. "You're bleeding," she whispered, voice cracking. He looked at her, eyes shadowed but